G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with a new build series, and this time we're going back to the Gundam universe. So this is from a series of Bandai kits called the UC Hardgraph, and we are going to be building the Zeon Mobile Scout set. So the great thing about these kits is they're 1/35th scale, so you can actually do some weathering, and you know, for those of you who are into modelling armour in 1/35th scale, this is a perfect set if you want to get into something that's a bit more science fiction. So I'm kind of sorry that Bandai didn't continue this line. This is from 2006, so it's a fairly dated kit now. And they did do a series of them. There's a number of sets under the UC Hardgraph, but they sort of made a number of kits under this line and then just let it go, which is a bit of a shame. I'm looking forward to building this one. I have had a little bit of experience with the UC Hardgraph range, and the fact that I have built up this, which is from the codename Cyclops set. So it gives you a bit of an idea of, you know, it is 1/35th scale. I've weathered this one, but the detail is amazing. I mean, this little Jeep, you know, it does have fully functioning steering on it. It has a number of options, beautiful decals that come with it. You know, really sort of detailed 1/35th scale model kits. So I've had a little bit of experience with it, with these style of kits. But I thought in this episode I would obviously put it together, but also just show you the sprues as well, just in case you're interested to see what comes in the box. There's only 5 sprues in this kit, so it's not, you know, it's not a huge amount of parts in it, but the parts are beautifully detailed, and of course, typical Bandai, there's zero flash. Yeah, really fine detail. They are molded in color, but of course, they're better off once they're actually painted up. But you can really sort of see, especially in this, you know, in this frame, you can sort of see the detail they put into it. You know, got all the rivets and all that sort of thing. So you really go to town with weathering these things up. And I should say that these UC Hardgraph kits, they do recommend you use glue. So these are not just sort of press fit kits like you would have with a, you know, with a HG or an MG or PG's, you know, Gundam kits. But you look at the sort of fine detail we've got in these pieces. Then you have the figures. So this comes with 2 figures. I believe it comes with a pilot and also a guy just sort of standing by. So you do have to sort of glue the limbs on the figures in the way that you want them. And the final sprue, which is a small one, is the fans. Now this vehicle, I believe it's called a Whopper. It's like a motorbike hovercraft machine, so it's really quite a unique design. I was thinking about potentially lighting it, but I don't think I will. The only real light that it has is this one underneath, and I don't think it's really worth sort of lighting up. I actually thought this thing here was, you know, there's one on the other side as well. I thought these were lights, but they're not. It's actually a radiator. So yeah, I don't know if I worry about lighting this one up. But I should say also in the instructions, they actually give you a lot of details, or lots of, you know, photos of one that's already been painted up. So they give you an indication of how you might want to weather it. They give you a color guide. They also give you an option for an alternate version, alternate painted version. But I think I'll go with the green military version, sort of almost a World War II military look. Does also come with water slide decals, so unlike master grades, high grades, perfect grades, thankfully it does come with water slide decals, so I'm pretty happy about that. But the next step is to actually cut out all the parts and clean them all up and start the assembly. A lot of it's going to be all the same sort of color, so I think I'll be gluing most of this together into sub-assemblies and then painting as sub-assemblies and putting it all together. So starting assembly of this kit, I've had a look through the instructions, and I don't know if there's too many sub-assemblies I'm going to be able to put together before I start painting. So the first step, which is this, I guess, chassis, part of the chassis of this contraption, it is very delicate. It's got this long sort of spindly bit up here that the canopy and the chair sort of mount onto, and then you've got these two, I guess, housings for the rotors, and then they sandwich together. And in between the sandwich, we have this little piece which is like a headrest, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take that off for now. I won't glue it in place, because when I stick these two halves together I'll be able to actually separate these two, no problems, to actually get it back in there. The controller, so that has to go in, I believe, this way. So that sort of sandwiches in there. So the controller, the yoke, has to go in there before I put this piece on. So now it's a matter of sort of lining everything up. And there are pegs and holes to help you sort of make sure that everything marries up properly. And so that way I can sort of squash everything together, get it in there, and then I can sort of start gluing things together. Now with these parts here, the join I'm not actually going to glue this join here, and the reason for that is because the rotor goes in there and it gets, so the rotor sort of has these, or I guess this is the rotor vent, has these two pegs, and they marry up to two little holes on the sides here. Now the problem is if I glue this up, I don't think I'll be able to actually get those two pegs in there. So I think I'm going to leave it until yeah, I don't know how I'm going to sort of manage that. Maybe I will have to glue it, because I'm thinking I've got to sort of paint all this, and I want to deal with the seams. The seams aren't too bad, like it actually marries up pretty well, but I do want to get rid of that seam if I can. So even though there's a housing that goes over the top, I would actually like to display it with at least one of the housings sort of off, to sort of show the workings underneath. So time to get gluing. This really isn't going to need much glue at all, so let's see what happens if I glue. I might just try and glue this bit first. I might just do one. I should do the back one, because if I stuff that up, that's not the end of the world. So I'm going to get a little bit glue in here. Marry that up. So I just want to see if once this is sort of set, whether I can actually get these in here, whether I can sort of manhandle them in. Because if I can't, I think it's going to be a bit of a problem, and I may not be able to get rid of these seams here, which I won't be too happy about. But that aside, the level of detail in this thing is just unbelievable. So get a good look at, and you've sort of got some vents there, you've got some sort of bit of rivet detail. It is a superbly detailed kit, but it's just about, you know, it's quite a fragile sort of machine. It's, you know, got lots of bits hanging off it that I'm sure I'm going to break at some stage, especially these two. So I wouldn't say that this kit is for the light-hearted. It's certainly not a beginner's kit, just sort of looking at the way it's constructed. But I think it's certainly going to be an enjoyable kit, especially for those of you who like your 1/35th scale armour and you're looking to do something that's a little bit different, something maybe a little bit more sci-fi. Yeah, it might be worth sort of looking at. Alright, so let's see if I can get these in here. No, it's just come straight apart. Now I know this little hole in here, there's like a guardrail that goes around it that I'm going to have to glue in there. So that'll glue that up eventually, and I know that'll be fine. But it's really these seams. So maybe if I can deal with these seams and still have enough flex in it to get this in there, that might be the way to go. So I am making this up as I go, so apologies if I sound a bit random. But that's kind of part of the process, isn't it really? You sort of, sometimes you come across a kit where you're trying to work out the order of operations. That's half the fun, isn't it? Problem solving, working out how you're going to do this stuff so it looks the best you can get. Make sure I'm trying to minimise that line as much as possible, the join line. So I know I tend to find when I'm working on models, I maybe get a little bit lazier towards the end of the build process. I tend to sort of get really finicky at the start of the kit building process, and then by the end I'm sort of a bit more haphazard about it. So I think it's just the nature of the amount of time you spend on a project. You sort of wear a bit thin on it and just want to get it finished. I don't like leaving kits unfinished. It's kind of I guess one of my neuroses. I like to finish kits. Either finish them, or if they're really driving me nuts, I take a hammer to them. I sort of like working on, sometimes I have two kits on the go, but normally I like to have just one. So I'm hoping there's sort of enough flex in there. I think there will be, because I really want to get all this painted in one hit. The colour scheme for it, I haven't fully decided yet, but I'll be going with something very similar to this. It'll be a sort of a light green, and I'll probably do a darker green tone for some of the details. So I'm going to keep pretty close to this. I'm not a big fan of the blue scheme, and I think given that these are military vehicles, it would make more sense that they're potentially a more traditional military colour scheme. Alright, so let's see how we go with this. I think it goes in that way. Yeah, okay, so it looks like that'll work. We'll marry that up once that's in there. Yep. Might be a bit of finagling to get it lined up properly, but I think that's the best of what I can do, because I do want these to move. You can obviously just glue them in place if you want. Now a lot of these seams will be covered up by other armour pieces that will be glued in, so I'm not too concerned about having a seamless join sort of at the back there. But I do want it to be seamless along the top of these rotor housings. I've completed the base coat on all the different sub-assemblies and different parts. So I've separated out the rotor housings, done them a different colour to add a bit of interest, similar to what they've actually done on what they've shown in the instructions. And I've used 2 different greens, so just to pick out some, have a little bit of variety between the colours. A couple of panels and things that I've done in this sort of darker green, but the rotor housings and the rotors are basically this light grey. And the leather components I've painted just in brown, and I'm going to do some work to make them look like worn leather. So the paints I used were, for the main chassis colour, I used British Interior SMS paints again. For the darker green I used German Olive. For the light grey I used this Barley Grey. For brown I used SMS Brown. And finally, some of the legs for the wapa, it's a bit hard to see on camera, but that's actually a metallic steel over black. So I used the SMS metallic steel. So with all this base coat down, it's just a matter of me going through and doing some detail painting first. So things like the handle on the control stick here, there's a few other little bits and pieces that need a bit of detail painting. There isn't a huge amount, but things like the rear light here will need to be painted red. There's things like the straps on the cover here. So there's a few things that just need a bit of detail painting, and I'll just be doing that with Vallejo Model Air. So once I get all that detail painting done, I can then gloss coat everything and get the decals down. So I'll show it once I'm up to that stage. So see you soon. I gave everything a gloss varnish, and I did a panel line wash, and I used a combination of Tamiya accent panel liner and some washes that I made myself by thinning down some Tamiya enamel paints. So it's just to pick out a little bit of the detail. I also hand painted some of the sort of smaller details, such as the light lens at the back, the handle on the control stick, and some of the other small sort of detail pieces like this pouch. It is all very glossy at the moment, so it's a little bit hard to see. I'm going to flat coat all of this before I go into the more detailed weathering stage. So I just wanted to have a gloss on it while I was doing the panel lines. And you can see the decals I put down, they've come up. Actually, I think it goes that way. That's the right way up. So the decals went down reasonably well. I did have a couple of them tear. So those 2 dials, there was a tear in there. And I'd also recommend that you cut them right down to the edge, because they've got quite a bit of carrier film that sort of hangs over the edge of them. I tried to go with a worn leather look on the seat. I don't know how well that worked out. I just used some Vallejo paints and I just tore off a bit of sponge and sort of dabbed it on. Again, because it's sort of shiny, it's a bit hard to see, but I used a combination of 71118 camouflage grey, 71036 mahogany, and 71136 earth brown. So I used a combination of those to stipple on make the leather look a little bit worn. So here's a good example of the decals. I do actually love how the front and back rotor cowls sort of look, rotor covers or whatever they're called. They are very reminiscent of a Zaku, especially in this colour. I kind of like that attention to detail. You can see here one of the decals ripped, so just above the E there, but you know, it's not so much of an issue. That's just going to be a bit of weathering, but just be careful when you're sort of moving them around. I used lots of microsol to get those decals to conform to the curve, but they've come up pretty well, and they'll come up a bit better once a flat coat goes on it. And again, just the number plate on the front bumper. These things are so fragile, you just got to be really careful with them. And just on that topic, I still haven't sealed these up, so you can still see there's a gap there, and that's just so that I can get the rotor in underneath, and then I'll be putting in the you know, these bumpers, which sort of will get glued in place there. And then finally, just for the machine gun, I gave it a very light dry brush with 71073 black metal, player model there, and just paint on a little bit of brown detail on the handle there. Just very subtle dry brushing, so it'll come up once it's got a matte coat on it. So the next step for me, of course, is to put the matte coat down, and then it'll be on to the final weathering. So I want to do some sort of work with oils, a bit more enamel work, some pigments, and of course all that stuff tends to work better if it's on a matte surface. So I will be flat coating all of this stuff ready for that. But that'll be in the next video. So until then, catch you later.